So, welcome to our next podcast this week, our Valentine's Day special. I've got Naveen here where we're going to get into how AI impacts relationships and love. So, it started with Naveen actually showing me something where he was communicating with a sibling in a relationship. So, Naveen, why don't you tell the story?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually just it was a story where it was Pongal. So it was an Indian holiday. And one of my sister-in-law sent us a happy Pongal in Tamil text, and I'm a bad South Indian who only knows English, and I have no idea what any of that means. And so, and for anybody who's familiar with Tamil, obviously it's a completely different text. It's not alphanumeric; like it looks totally foreign.
Characters.
Yes, exactly. I saw characters. So I copied that into ChatGPT, and I basically said, my relative just said this. Like, what does it mean? And then I was like, wait a minute. I bet I can communicate using this. So I said, what is an appropriate response for this in Tamil? And then it just gave me a Tamil Unicode, string. I just copied and pasted it back into my phone, sent it back, and then started communicating in Tamil with my sister-in-law. And it worked pretty well. At one point, she was like, she said, "Wow, that's really good." And then I said in Tamil, "Well, our computing overlords give me a power that I don't actually possess." And then she's like, "What computing overlord?" And like we kind of went through it, and it was really funny. And at one point, she was actually impressed. I mean, the grammar was off in one place, so then I asked OpenAI to apologize for using the wrong grammar in Tamil. Did all of that, and then she was like, "Wow!" And so it made me realize that I could be bilingual in text without anyone even realizing it, right?
Well, so it's interesting, right? I traveled internationally and lived internationally in Shanghai and Germany in a time pre-Google Translate and pre-AI, where, go out, eat at a menu, didn't have let me just translate the menu on my phone. So, even pre-AI, Google Translate has gotten good at language translation.
You can take a picture. Actually, I think nowadays you don't even need to take the picture.
Yeah, you just do it real time.
Look at put your camera at the menu, and it'll translate it for you, right?
Yeah, but AI is changing now that equation because it's not now just a translation. Like the difference between translation and communication, right, is when you're communicating, you can contextualize the language in which you communicate with another human being.
Yep.
So I think AI will take translation to the next level, no doubt.
Totally.
I think we all can agree on that.
And actually, I can kind of reference that in my conversation. It's like, I think the communication was so convincing that my sister-in-law felt like, I need to correct the grammar here. It's not about the meaning. I think she knew what I meant, but she's like, the grammar's wrong.
Yeah, and it's a learning system. It'll get better.
It'll get better. And so it's like, it's so good that she wanted it to be perfect, right? Yeah. And so I think that speaks.
So now, of course, I'm going to take it in kind of okay, so that's your sibling relationship. I'm like, how does it work in all other relationships? So, the first relationship angle that I start thinking about is dating or love or marriage or those types of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had this situation with my wife. It was her birthday. Actually, probably just a week ago today. This was actually last Friday was my wife's birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, so happy birthday if you're listening. But the nature of it was, I was like, oh, I'm going home. I should go to Hallmark and pick up a card.
Yep.
And then I was like, wait a minute. Let me just go home. And I don't need Hallmark to write me a card. I can go to ChatGPT and be like, this is my wife. This is what she likes. She's turning whatever age. I'm not going to say her age right now. And, and it generated the thing. And I used to have old dot matrix printers where we used to fold cards. I couldn't remember how to fold a piece of paper into a card.
Yeah.
But I made her a card. And she's like, did you write this? Right? And I'm like, of course I did. I leaned into the idea that I wrote it because I think in our previous podcast, we described what authorship means.
Yep, that's right.
Right? In my mind, I did write it. I was the author. I put in more effort into this than buying a Hallmark card.
I'll give you that. Yeah, totally. 100%.
Right? But she's like, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I would have preferred a handwritten, your words, not AI's words. You're not that romantic, right? It was basically so she's like, there's no fooling me with your, beautiful well-written, romantic card. So my first question to you is, okay, it was an experiment to see if AI would change the relationship and the communication with my wife.
Right.
Do you see the use in that AI situation as positive or negative?
Well, it's funny. So we did talk about this, but I actually went to I was thinking about Hallmark cards actually, and I usually, my card buying experience, like with my wife, is, I'm going to look through the cards and I'm trying to find the one that matches kind of closest to the meaning that I want, or like, am I trying to go funny or emotional, whatever, and then I'll usually write a little note. But I guess I ended up with, and maybe I need to try it out too. I was like, oh, I could probably make a more custom card. And I feel like ignoring authorship and all of that, I feel like I would have, it's more touching, right? It's like, oh, I put in some effort, I specialized it, it's yours, it's unique.
What would your wife say about it, though?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm gonna have to run that experiment.
Run the experiment.
Exactly. But like I do put in birthday cards or whatever. I do put in a little paragraph of
handwritten,
handwritten sentimental stuff. I'm a sentimental guy. But this is where the time saver Naveen comes in. I'm like, I wonder if I could just go find all the cards that I've written her, like enter in all that text into ChatGPT, and then say, I need to write a new little paragraph for a birthday card. Can you just come up with one for me?
My wife, it's funny you bring that up because my wife, she's like, no, it's not. It'll never be the same as you. And I'm like, but if I trained it on me as a source data, it would be. And she's like, no, it wouldn't. So that's the difference between we were getting into it. Because I was net positive on the impact in the relationship. I actually went in as a scientific experiment thinking she would appreciate it, and it would she'd be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And I was so wrong.
So maybe the takeaway is if we start using, there's a small window here where those of us who use GPT or LLMs all the time, we should just not tell anyone about it.
Well, I feel like that's disingenuous in my relationship. You know what I mean? When she's like, did you write it? I'm like, I did, but if you ask the prompt a different way, I might answer a different way. I'm like, in my mind I did, but I'm not lying to you.
Exactly, right, exactly.
Right. So the nature, though, is, okay, that's one use case, but I asked my son this, right, because it's interesting. Because I was like, okay, that's a simple example, but what about love?
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, do you think AI is good for love or bad for love? And he's 11, so it's interesting to understand the perspective of an 11-year-old, but he's like, oh, absolutely, it's good for love. And I'm like, explain. And he's like, well, they sequenced the DNA genome, and, I would think with AI, you could compare two genomes to find compatibility to make better babies. And I was like, okay, I didn't think about the biological implications of AI and love and compatibility and, nature versus nurture and all of that.
That's all Gattaca now.
Well, there's a lot of sci-fi material around, compatibility matching in the literature space. But how does it, so we talked about our kind of relationship in kind of the marriage context, but what about people who come up now? There's people who are born in the post-iPhone, post-social media generation.
Yep.
Online dating's a big thing.
Totally.
People are trying to meet. Let me give you a scenario. Let's say we all have friends that are either very well skilled in the domain space or not skilled in the domain space of don't put foot in your mouth in a relationship.
Yep.
Right? There's different people on different learning spectrums on how to communicate on online dating platforms, et cetera. So we've always talked about AI and co-pilots and engineering and code and application development and that type of thing.
Yep.
But what about a communication co-pilot that, as you're about to send the text message to said significant other, it's like, would you rather say it this way?
Yep.
Or maybe you're being emotional and you might want to wait to send this tomorrow. Is that a net positive or a net negative in the communication and dating scene?
Look, I think there's actually, I think we should talk about two different camps, and I think we should separate our conversation. So the first conversation is around that initial getting to know someone, even like the match scenario, right? And I don't think we're talking about that, but I think we should come back to it. But I think here we're talking about you are in a committed relationship with someone, and you maybe, or maybe just you're in a relationship. Maybe it's not very far along, but you're just trying to communicate in a way that helps the relationship rather than hurts the relationship, which is, I think, the goal of all of us.
That's how we want to communicate, right? That's all relationships.
Exactly. And I know that, in terms of putting my foot in my mouth, I sometimes want a, outside observer to be like, you could have said that differently. Like, I know what you were trying to say, but here was an alternative, right? So I think it would be cool if I could get that real-time feedback of, yeah, you could also say it this way. And I could learn from that, right?
Do you want that post or do you want that inline pre? Would you rather have the observer tell you after you put your foot in your mouth or before?
I mean, because I've only really thought about it outside of the context of, GPT or whatever, or I've always thought of it as a post. But now that you bring it up, like, I would want that as a pre, right? It's like, I'm about to say this. And in the text world, this is something you can actually do. Like writing an email or writing a text, it's like, the intent of what you're trying to say, has this like mansplaining tone to it. Maybe tone it down a little bit.
Tone it down a little
right,
bit.
Or tone it down a little bit. I would love that. And I think it would actually allow me to learn to communicate better, right? It gives me insight into myself, insight into what I'm trying to do. So like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that's positive, right? I mean,
look, I'm of the same mind, but, so I kind of view communication as a skill.
Right.
Just like
Absolutely.
any skill,
Absolutely.
right? And you want to learn a skill, you need a practice.
Yep.
And you want to, like, wouldn't it be nicer if you could practice in more safer ways?
Yeah.
And look, if you look at a large enough human population, right? Like if I go back to the beginning where I said, okay, there's going to be the people that are really good at, communicating and picking up people, and there are people who have no confidence and are learning, like, get nervous and whatever. It could create this situation where, for most people, I think humans have the capacity to learn and get better. So for most people, they would look at those prompts and it'd be like, oh, so next time when they actually are original authors,
right,
they would probably improve their communication skills.
I would think so, yeah.
And become less dependent on the corrective nature of AI.
Right.
And thus, AI's helping you learn and improve a skill.
Totally. Actually, I think there's a simple thought experiment I think everybody could run on themselves, and I'm curious where everyone would land. I think spell checking makes me better at spelling.
I 100% agree.
Right? And so when I'm not the type of person that will just be like, accept. I'm just like, oh yeah, weird. I did spell that wrong, and now I understand this spelling, right? So I'm taking that real-time feedback from something that's correcting me, and I think I would do that here. But I suppose there are people who would just blindly...
in a large statistical deviation,
right,
you have to assume most people have the capacity to want to learn and the intent to improve and the intent to communicate in the best effective way. Everyone wants to get better at this.
Yeah.
There's probably a small cohort of people, they're like, it's doing it for me. Why do I need to learn?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I like to think of humanity where there's a small minority which will become addicted to the handicap. Like it'll create a handicap.
Exactly. But they'll still be, it's still a useful tool. Like spell check is still useful to the person who never learns anything about how to spell.
Till they have to go to a spelling bee.
Until they have to go to a spelling bee.
Right? Like that's the thing about communication, right? At some point, you may meet this person you're texting with in person. Right? And, I'm not going to say like, oh, at some point in the future, there might not be a chip that like, changes the way you think and communicate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a little sci-fi-ish.
Yeah.
Right?
It's actually not that far. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the nature is like, okay, like we both believe this is probably a positive communication and learning technique.
Yep.
Right? Now, let's play it out a little bit further, right? There have been NBC News articles and different scenarios where there are online AI bots that are online AI girlfriends.
Yep.
Right? So imagine that you could end up in a situation, you take this to one other extreme, where, okay, we know AI is non-deterministic, and we know it's a learning system, and we know all human beings have certain preferences. So you could design the perfect girlfriend, right? And sometimes the perfect girlfriend might be someone who needs to, if you need conflict, they may fight with you. It's not like, hey,
it's whatever you want.
It's whatever you maybe even need, not even know you want, right? Depending on how it learns.
That's fair.
And, my wife, I brought this up with her yesterday, and she's like, but it'll never be as good as a human. And I'm like, what if it's better? Yeah. Because as humans, our training data set is our singular experience. AI is the training data of all human beings it was trained on.
Yep.
So its emotional spectrum, not its logical spectrum, but its emotional spectrum will be wider and more diverse non-deterministically than an individual.
Totally.
So if you're using this to train, how is you're learning your first time you're dating on how to be a good boyfriend, right? Wouldn't this be positive? Like, hey, this is your learner girlfriend? Is that okay?
Now I'm going to go into that triggers dystopian, trigger Naveen, right? Yeah. But, the saying, it's funny when you're saying that, it made me think of, if anybody has had trouble with a relationship and they're trying to get over it, common saying is, there's other fish in the sea. But actually what made me think of it is like, oh man, AI could be all the fish in the sea. Which fish do you want?
Yeah.
Right. And I think you could use it positively. You could use it as a trainer, but that could go down a bad path, I think. I don't know. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand, and I think some people will take comfort in it. It's almost like I don't mean to be denigrating anyone in this way, but it's like almost like a companion, right? That you just need a comfort companion, right? And it can provide real emotional support to you, and I get that. I think it could also cause us. It could be so good that you may not want to move to the real person, because a real person, unfortunately, does not learn at the rate of AI.
Well, look, here I tend to agree with you. I think in most previous podcasts we had more conflict and disagreement. I think in this one we have probably a pretty strong disagreement that, it could go pretty south pretty fast.
Yeah, because you want to accept people, for the things that you really appreciate in them and you love in them. But
AI can create flaws just like people. Like, it can do that for you.
But I mean, don't you think we're going to quickly train it for no, I want you to be even better. I mean, okay, maybe you're a better person than I am. But if I step back, I mean, don't I try to train my wife? I'm like, no, can you just not be like that? Can you be like this instead? Right?
But look, after you've been married 15 years, you're like, no, I accept you for who you are, right?
I mean, true. It doesn't mean I stop saying it. Of course, I'm going to keep saying
I always go back to, how do you set the dishwasher, right? That's for anyone who's been married a long time. There's a right and wrong way to set the dishwasher. And in my wife's view, I'm a sociopath and will never set it the right way. Naveen is
I do it the right way.
A dude does it the right way.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yep.
But what I would state is, yes, just in the previous, you have a cohort where there's a potential for abuse, right? But there's a potential for good.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in this AI girlfriend scenario, I think we probably agree that the potential for bad can happen very quickly.
Yes.
Very destructively. And I kind of go back to early days porn. Right now we know people have large porn addictions, right? And the impact on society. It's been well researched in studies. So could it create AI girlfriend addiction?
100%.
When you cross over to addiction is when you skip the line of healthy, right? Emotional support to hey, I'm addicted. That line can happen very quickly. So if we're trying to judge, because I think we're trying to figure out, okay, we're early. Yep. We're not going to have to deal with this. This is but we're probably going to have to deal with this with our kids.
With our kids, yeah.
Right? 100%. I don't think we're going to be there in 3 to 5 years, but when my kids enter the dating marriage scene, I actually think these things will be real things that society has to grapple with.
Totally. And I think there's the addiction side, which I think is totally valid, which is these AI bots might get so good that you want to communicate with it all the time, and it gives you something that's almost like a drug. But there's another aspect to it that I'm also curious about, which will play out in my kids' dating scene, which is I think about Match.com, right? Okay, you create, and this is kind of going back to the other cohort that we were talking about. This is you're trying to meet someone and get to know someone, and find someone that you could have a compatible relationship with. And, Match.com or speed dating or anything, all of it is like, here's my profile, here's my interests, and someone else posts theirs, and maybe the software will help you match it up a little bit. And then you kind of have to go through this process of, trying to initiate conversation and see if they're interested or not. I think one of the things we're going to see happen is I could train my match bot, and you could have your match bot, and then our match bots are going to basically communicate with each other to try and figure out are we compatible with each other? And so they kind of start to interrogate each other, and then actually where my mind went with that is like maybe they'll even decide to go on a date.
Okay, hold on. I got to unpack so many things here. Wow, mind blown, right? So I was thinking about like when we first started talking about podcasting, where I was like, okay, this is new for both of us. Neither of us have ever done this before. But part of the tipping point for me mentally was I'm like, well, AI needs more training data from humans, and we're automatons contributing to the body of work for AI. Right. This podcast and the transcripts are automatons contributing to the body of work.
Sure.
So if I bring it back to your relationship profile, like, let's actually break that down, because today profiles is what I tell it.
Yeah.
And that's not the truth. Like, in most of the time, it's the most positive thing.
True.
So if, from a life cycle standpoint, if the first part of the profile is what is the Naveen digital, if you grew up in an AI world, right? Like, I think a lot of people say, give me your phone and I can say so much about you. That's your digital footprint.
Yeah.
Right? And how you organize your apps, what apps you have. Like, there's so much you can learn just by looking into someone's digital footprint.
100%.
So what if your first thing is just upload your digital ID, which is your footprint.
Yeah.
Right? And that's your profile. It's the sum total of your behaviors and experiences and your LinkedIn and like whatever it is, right? Yep. So it's a more superior profile to get you to the closer end game.
Yep.
Right? Then you apply your two bots meeting and dating and all of that on it. So you're starting with a better training data set on the original.
And hopefully that data set, I could, in a way that it's almost like it doesn't leak any information about me. It's just it's a thing that contextualized enough about me that it can interact and help me find what I want, right?
Yeah, look, I think I've long been a proponent that, privacy is a thing that will eventually go away. You know what I mean? And as much as I hate that, and the European Union tries to fight it with GDPR and that type of thing, I'm like, society has always been like forward moving in terms of industrial revolution, technology, disruption, transformation.
Yep.
At some point, privacy is left behind. At that, like, you are who you are, your information's out there. There's going to be cameras everywhere in the future. Like,
totally.
I
mean, in social media and all of this. I mean, like, so for me, I think the idea that there's something that can understand what I am and then use it to my advantage, like I've already gone down the path of like, that's going to happen. So the privacy part of that, it goes away. But that it can represent me is, I think, where things are going to get interesting. And I really do think we could get into because that whole matchmaking experience is just awkward for everyone. Nobody really wants it, blah, blah, blah. So it's just like, cut to the chase, filter out all the crap.
Did you ever have to live through that or no?
No, not. I've tried to avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, so I haven't, right? Like, I met my wife and all of that. Or, you know what I mean? So I have no firsthand experience here. I'm speaking through
vicariously.
Yeah, vicariously.
Totally, yeah.
Right. But, if I project, where I think things will evolve, let's get back to the relationship side and the love side of it, right? AI, we talked about it in marriage relationships, dating relationships, but like even at work, we have work relationships.
Yep.
We all send emails, Slack, whatever. Slack communication assistant that, in the work setting, that it's like, hey, don't say it this way, say it this way.
That could help a lot, actually.
Right.
Yeah, actually, when you said that, actually, I wonder if there's another flavor of this, which is not just trying to understand what you said, but if, and I wonder if somebody's already working on this, something that's just monitoring the channel, right? And LLM can detect, hey, the conversation's getting a little bit escalated here. I'm detecting some anger, detecting some frustration, and it can start to signal the participants, like, hey, whoa, like, these signals are coming through. Like, if that's intentional, great. Like, go ahead and continue to flame your coworker, right? But maybe you didn't intend that, and maybe here's some other tactics you can start employing. Because I think sometimes in the moment, and by the way, I think a lot of this is text. Actually, no, I take that back. It happens in person, but it definitely happens over text, where we don't even perceive that we are coming across the way we are. We're, like in my head anyway. I think this happens to everyone. I'm like, I said this in the most objective, kindest way possible.
And then, he got mad at me.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so I think that's a positive aspect that would be nice. If, it's almost like just tagging your conversation of like, warm tone, check mark, or confrontational, like, just knowing how you're coming across.
But look, part of it, are we taking humanity, like, let's say we do it even in a work setting. Are we taking the humanity and the learning of what it means to be human away?
I think that comes back to my original criticism, which was, if I start to expect someone to communicate perfectly, then I don't think I'm satisfied with a real person anymore. I think I'm really asking for everyone to be this, optimized artificial thing, which everyone maybe is trying to get to as best they can given what they learn. But,
this feels like Ready Player One conversation, right? Like, we're like,
totally.
are we going into the hey, I need to live there because I don't want to live here?
Yeah. So, because like the context of Ready Player One, they kind of live in like a metaverse, right? And they all have their own identities there. They're totally disconnected from their
but here's
real
the
identities.
Thing. A lot of people said metaverse would happen and all of that, and it never really, like, no one ended up in Second Life or metaverse kind of like
yet.
Small populations fair point, but like there's always been the prediction in Doom that humanity would escape humanity, and it's kind of never happened.
Right.
So as a historian, I kind of think, meh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Humans will still come back. Like, that's a bridge too far for us, and we just won't let that happen to ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that's a topic we can get into next time. And I think the relationship aspect of it is that I'm hopeful we use it as a tool, but I really think that, Hallmark cards and whether we actually prefer to communicate with our actual significant other versus, our avatar of our significant other. Like, these are all the things that are going to be challenges we need to face. And I need to help coach my kids through, actually.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So look, I think net, we're both AI optimists. I think we believe it's a tool. Like any tools can, guns can be used to protect, guns can be used to kill. You know what I mean? So, I think there's definitely an upside downside, and I think if I'm summarizing our conversation, is an assistant in the early side of life cycle fairly positive?
Fairly positive.
As you get to the later life cycle of relationships, you want to transition away, and there's always going to be two roads taken, the addiction or the non-addiction train.
Yeah.
And we hope that you get off on the right road before you end up in a fairly bad place. Yes?
Yep. You use the tool to make yourself, the human, a better human, and try to interact with other humans.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
I think that's it. All right. Thanks, Naveen.
Thanks.
I'll see you next time.
See you next time.